At the foundational layer of fighting games is the mind game. The perspective and ideas that you and your opponent engage with are the element that concepts of strategy, knowledge, gimmicks, and every other possible avenue of human thought rest upon. Though you're still bound by the world of code, whether you play with reactions that outspeed your opponent or an intricate understanding of the limited possibility space, at the end of the day, fighting games are those that exist within a distinct layer of humanity. But what if your opponent wasn't human? What if your opponent wasn't faster than you, smarter than you? Hell, they never had a mind to begin with. I want to tell you a story. It's not a very long story, it's not very complicated. In fact, it's a story that's only really a single number. In April of 2024, if you were playing Tekken 8, there was a slim chance you would have run into a very, very unique player. Not a man, not even really a machine. A lone command, repeated for hours and hours and hours on end. One which challenged the very nature of the mind game. It's April 4th, 2024. Tekken 8 has been out for about 3 months and a dangerous day is coming. DLC Day. Tekken 7 had a bit of an issue. They just kept releasing characters that were absurd in the established framework. Geese bordered on ridiculous at launch in 2017. Leroy was infamously broken and almost entirely shut out the competitive meta in his initial 2019 launch. Farkamram, while maybe a little less notorious than Leroy, to Tekken players was the most detrimental event to society in 2020. A history of errors made the community somewhat anxious as DLC Day drew closer. The next character was also Eddie, a returning fan favorite that might incentivize the dev team to push the power sliders forward. If not for profit, then to satisfy the power fantasy of being 7 years old playing Tekken 3. Bracing for impact, ready for disaster, Eddie released and was fine. The character didn't have a meteoric impact and, quite frankly, felt more like filling in a gap that should have already been there.
But I just think right now he's like mid. I wouldn't put him like super top tier or anything.
Ever since Tekken 3, Eddie had been in the base roster for every single game. He was the same old character, a mash-friendly, handstand happy guy. The same base with a couple of new additions, none of which fundamentally changed the fact that he was beginner-friendly in ways that almost actively encouraged the stupid. There's an old GameFAQs guide for the character from 1997 that opens, first of all, think of button mashing as an art form. Eddie's many different stances that flow into and out of one another had, and still has him, move in a way that can be somewhat unpredictable to the uninformed player. He didn't require much knowledge of why pressing 3 and 4 worked, which made him perfect for people who didn't know that Tekken went beyond beginner and didn't care to know. As is the case with people who take playing toys seriously, however, this couldn't be relied on against someone who would study the game and explore its many layers. Just because he's able to do a lot of things without thinking doesn't mean that any of those things are particularly good, the way that it should be, the way that it always was, and thankfully for the player base, the way that it would be now. With release day out of the way, the community churned in usual fashion. My character sucks, your character is broken, the whole game sucks. Standard discussion for someone who was about to put 1,000 more hours into the game. The only thing that people were looking forward to now was EVO Japan, starting on the 27th. It wasn't the first major since the game started, but it was one to look forward to. All eyes on Asia as the region was ready to show off the best of their best. EVO Japan also just so happens to have some of the most infamous stories within the game come out of it. So to take eyes away from it would take something very odd. Somewhere in the dark cold of Europe, an unknown Tekken player was working on a small script, 13 lines of Python. It wasn't aware of what it does, it doesn't even know the world that it's going to be put inside. It just is, an endless loop of off and on, one that would turn a stereotype into reality. I made a Tekken bot that only presses 3. The user who'd become known as Jim Mashima posted to the Tekken subreddit with a Twitch stream, a fresh Tekken account, and as the title promised, a bot that only pressed 3, playing as Eddie. Going from the bottom rank of the game, it was a machine that could do a repeated attack sequence over and over at an infinite rate. Tekken's input system has the buttons labeled 1 through 4, with 3 being reserved for attacks that mainly use the left leg. Crucially though, it's also the button that confirms options on the menu, allowing a bot that only pressed 3 to both attack and navigate menus in an infinite cycle. Every match would be accepted, every match would request a rematch, and if the opponent left, every match would return the bot back to the matchmaking queue. The bot wasn't aware of what stage of either match or queue it was in, it would press 3 every 6 frames and then let go for 6 frames, and repeat over and over. With a stream up, everyone was able to view its progress. However, being on the same weekend as EVO, very few people will watch it. Almost instantly, the stream caught on like wildfire. The first 30 minutes, 3 viewers. An hour, 5. 2 hours, 120. A part of that popularity came from the fact that it was a novelty. Almost all Tekken streams are people playing Tekken, being content creators. So to find a machine was an odd novelty to check out. The man behind the machine was also entirely silent. Excluding a few Reddit comments, Jim almost never commented on what or why anything was being done. This elusive creator on a silent stream wouldn't have caught on if it wasn't for the fact that the bot was kind of doing well. The Tekken 8 rank system isn't too dissimilar to a lot of other fighting games, but is a little bit odd in how it works. While your account is ranked with a hard number, there's several ranks through which the points gained or lost from each win are calculated. Throughout the first 9 ranks, it's impossible to lose any points gained, so you naturally climbed so long as you play enough. At this point, the pool of players ranges from Tekken prodigy who's playing Lily to guy whose main goal with Kazuya is to make him serve and slay, a range of skill levels that makes any of the results impossible to judge as performance. After rank 10, Warrior, is when you start to lose points. You might expect a bot that does the same thing over and over again to languish in this territory for a while. However, it had only been there for a couple of hours before it got to Warrior. Now, it was a case of watching how far it could climb with actual consequences. And it was absolutely climbing. Watching from the sidelines, Jim was in the same position as the viewer, taken aback by the performance, and equally shocked that there were viewers at all. As a scrappy little script, it wasn't exactly primed for the kind of viewership that it garnered. Asked on Ash, genuinely inspirational talent and, at the time, debatably the best player in the world, 450 viewers. A bot in Europe that was 10 hours old, 1.6k. Already early, the chat had developed its own memes and culture, ASCII art, for a stream that comes to a grinding halt if the opponent declines a rematch too quickly, which it did. A bunch of little scenarios in which the bot would break, specifically in menus, had Jim unable to leave the house for any extended period of time. He added a couple of extra lines of script to have the bot tap down every 3 minutes to fix the rematch issue specifically, but there was still edge cases that it would get snagged on. As the bot churned through players in Europe, it just continued to grow and grow in popularity, especially in America and Europe where the stream time for EVO meant catching almost none of the event. The dominant reaction to the stream as it pushed past ranks could be summarized as, "My god, what's going on?" and "How is this working?" Which is a good question to ask. In this loop, Eddie transitions between 3 stances: standing, handstand, and relaxed stance, repeating in that sequence. It starts with a decently fast mid-mid, into a pretty slow mid-high-high string, into a relatively fast low-high. Any attacks that count as high can be ducked, making this middle portion of the sequence particularly weak. And at the end of every transition, Eddie is at enough disadvantage to be counterattacked. In a practical sense, this looping transition has a ton of weaknesses, especially if you consider that the sequence in relaxed stance can be blocked low, while the last hit of handstand has to be ducked, giving the player the opportunity to find the same solution to multiple different problems within the same sequence. The issue, however, is that while this is very simple if you know the situation prior, in the moment all of this information isn't particularly clear. For example, while the last hit of every transition leaves Eddie wide open, the second and third hit of handstand almost looks like you have enough time to get an attack in, when in reality, you don't. A trap that a couple of players fell into themselves. If you get hit by the final hit of handstand, it also looks like you're going to be knocked down. However, you're in a crumple state where you're technically still still standing, so while you might expect to be able to roll or simply stay on the ground to take reduced damage and get out of the next interaction, you're forced to block low. You can attack Eddie at the end of every transition, however the moves that follow each transition put him very low to the ground, so fast, high options that are generally your best panic moves won't connect, and very occasionally, even mids. The range on these attacks were also deceptive, and like the majority of other moves in Tekken 8, advanced the player quite a lot, which occasionally made judging his range difficult. The expectation from viewers was that after a certain point, the bot would hit a wall. At a certain level, players are able to adapt on the fly to what is a repeated 3-point problem that's so simple it can't even navigate menus. However, rank after rank, it was still working. The bewildering success kept the stream enticing, some people checking on it every once in a while to see the progress, some people stuck to the stream to point and laugh until it was their turn on stream, and some just clip farming. In the first day, a clip on Twitter had gained 1.1 million views, and in the sea of successful clips, that was just one in the school of cloutfish. The subreddit, Twitter, the main man Swee, all ablaze with Eddie in the face of one of the largest fighting game tournaments of the year. The result was a cycle. The bot would hit a perfect or a new win streak, a clip would get shared around, which would bring more people into the stream ready to capture and share the next moment. Jim, during all of this, was largely silent but surprisingly present, waiting for the next weird and unexpected way that the menu could break the bot, at which point he'd have to manually retake control. For the viewers, this became a vehicle. The creator, as an unknown, silent voice, allowed the viewers to impart their own purpose onto the stream, to confirm or deny the biases of their own paranoia. As the stream grew, those perspectives kaleidoscoped, emerging as an endless fractal of speculation. Many believed that Jim set up the bot as protest. While Eddie had always had the reputation as a button masher, this new 3-string was exclusive to Tekken 8, a clear overreach in the mind of the viewer between stereotype and reality. The bot was proof that Eddie had been turned into a bastardization of himself, and that, though the pros couldn't see it, his release was meteoric. The boundless wisdom coming from this combination Tekken redditor wondered if it might be a conspiracy of game director Michael Murray's vision. Others took it further. The bot wasn't supposed to be a comment on Eddie specifically, but Tekken 8 as a whole, aggressively accommodating, designed for new players that hadn't earned the skills to win, something so gormless even a machine could outperform a real person. There's an irony there that was lost on them, which some viewers saw as being the truth, is that if the game is so incredibly approachable that a bot could play it, the myth of Tekken being a hard game simply wasn't true, and that any human could easily pick up the game and do well. Both camps on this side of the fence would use the stream as confirmation, however both could be argued by the bot at the same time. Evasive properties in the strings, along with a game that isn't always the most clear about what is possible, had players need to understand the defensive systems and also understand a visual language that's at times opaque. For example, the ducks in the second part of the sequence, while obvious when viewed with an overlay to tell you the move property, could be mistaken without an overlay for an ambiguous mid. Ducking is only obviously correct if you can already guarantee the move is high, in a situation you might have never seen before. While at Warrior, Vanquisher, and even Garyu a player typically has a combo or two down, training offense is much easier than training defense. If Eddie isn't a character that you've played as or against very often, there's not a lot of opportunity to know the defensive patterns that allow you to blow through the opponent. Even if you have, there's still a chance that this is a string either you or the person that you've played against just never used. What resulted was a wave of newer players who were getting thrown into a defensive chump check. They could still use the combos that they had learned, however they had to understand how to get there, which many didn't. At the same time, if these are the kinds of tools that are in the game, anyone can pick up characters without having to put much time into them at all. Divisive wasn't exactly a word that would come to the stream though. They were mostly backgrounds that people brought to the chat while typing a collection of the same copypastas. What it would inform is whether the viewer was for or against the bot. Those who saw the bot as an opportunity for the player to learn, to act as a test that the human was put through, would typically root for the player, unless of course the wizard appeared. If the viewer saw the bot as the epitome of everything wrong with the game, they typically cheered for the bot, seeing every success as further proof of their conviction that Tekken 8, unlike Tekken 7, a perfect game, was a cleverly disguised casino, with the jackpot being Harada's finger. And what's more fun than watching a slot machine? On day 1, 20,000 unique viewers. Day 2, 48,000. Day 4, 74,000. Initially, that viewership stayed somewhat contained within the Tekken sphere that is Twitter. Past EVO though, what does a gaming publication discuss midway through the week? EVO Japan was somewhat uneventful, without a major storyline to follow up on, blow-ups, controversies. It was just another tournament. Writing about game updates are only relevant to an extremely small amount of active players, which doesn't bring in new readers. What about a novel and unique application of a game that's immediately understandable? Now that's an article. Rock Paper Shotgun, IGN, Game Rant, they all brought in a new influx of viewers as the bot settled into a routine, with occasional developments on the side. A copycat had been made, except it was with Victor, who would repeat their 2-string, and another Eddie bot, Eddie Smurfy, was made in the United States. After the 5th day, however, even with new articles coming out, the stream had stopped growing. Watching a machine run the same loop over and over is hard to watch once the novelty wears off, even if you believe it proves something about the game at a fundamental level. What didn't help is that the bot had found themselves stuck around Destroyer without showing much progress. A bot that's able to churn through thousands of players without sleep would end up going through thousands and thousands of games, and after a week it ended up running out of players who weren't familiar with this particular gimmick. Towards the end, it was suspected that only 1 of every 3 games was someone genuinely playing. People were specifically ranking down to either prove that they could beat a bot on stream or deliberately throwing the match in an attempt to get the bot to a higher rank. Not that many people had to, as proven by a match early on in the saga. This is like almost approaching the top rank. Poll players, please educate your man. On top of that, even in genuine matches, there was news that the bot had gotten around and developed resources specifically against the bot. The bot, in becoming infamous, had also exposed the Tekken player base to its trick. Eventually, the human player learns, passes the test, so that they can return to the mind game. May the 1st had peak average viewers, May the 2nd had viewership drop by a quarter, and on May the 3rd, averaging less than 1,000 viewers, just as quickly as he showed up, Jim Mashima was powered down. All that was left was a question. Who was Jim Mashima? On April 27th, Jim Mashima was at his computer and thinking of ways to entertain himself. He was, in fact, bored. Thanks to the Norwegian national holiday known only as Saturday, he had the day off of work and was browsing YouTube until he came across a little video. Tekken content creator Main Man Sui had his roundup and thoughts on Eddie, generally happy with him but uninterested in playing him personally, and towards the end of the video, he shows off this.
If you press the free button over and over, it'll do a sequence that, I shit you not, involves string into handstand, handstand string into relax, into hell sweep.
Jim's first thought, like any good professional programmer, that can be automated. 5 minutes later, he had a bot, had purchased a whole new Tekken 8 copy on a different Steam account to not tank his already established rank, and had a test. It worked. Actually, it worked a little better than he was expecting. Not in terms of winning, according to Jim, not his real name by the way, it actually lost the first test game. However, the fact that it was able to navigate the menu was an act of cosmic coincidence. Since his involvement with the bot was so hands-off, he had become a viewer within his own making. He'd liked watching Salty Bet years ago, an online infinite matchmaking between machines playing a game called Mugen, and considered what he was looking at to be somewhat similar, so he might as well share it. He set up Twitch and a quick overlay to really drive home the stupidity of it all, and hey presto, he had a stream. Initially, he'd thought it would be a fun little gimmick to run for a couple of hours, a thing for him and his mates as he completely forgot about EVO that weekend. Something to run for a day's tops, maybe 2, but as the stream garnered a little bit of attention, he thought he'd keep it up for a couple more hours, maybe another day, and then the next day came with a new influx of viewers, and again, and again, and again. The only reason Jim Mashima went down wasn't because of threat of being banned from the game, though it did technically break the EULA. It was just because the bot had run its course. Better to go out high enough to be remembered fondly as a bot that dominated orange ranks for a few days than a joke that just wouldn't stop. That said, For all of its memory, the reputation that it had developed was absolutely prone to bias. It ran for a week, and between wall-to-wall clips of triple perfects was a much different reality. Playing roughly 4,000 matches, it only managed to win around 33% of the games. Again, a cosmically stupid coincidence. The rank it settled into was Destroyer, however managed to peak at Eliminator, just below the community expectation, and perhaps registering where real Tekken started. Its American counterpart, the Imitator, who was late to the party, did end up getting that red rank, perhaps proving that America truly is the land of the free. For all the speculation as to why Jim Mashima made the bot, it turned out to be quite simple, and perhaps ironically, human. It wasn't for protest or to prove anything. In his own words, I just wanted to see what would happen. I just wanted to make something fun. Howdy gamers, thanks for watching. Thank you to the patrons for making sure that I can eat food. And thank you to Jim Mashima. He was kind enough to have like a conversation with me, fill in some of the blanks and provide me a lot of statistics. He didn't want anything plugged, but he did say, just don't out me as a player quite yet. I don't know if I can handle the backlash. You viewer get to wonder what character that is for the rest of eternity. The Patreon now has some exclusive videos as well, so if you want more of me for some reason, you can go there, and there's some very like low-key videos while waiting for like bigger stuff like this and stuff in the future. Okay, I've disappeared now. Bye bye.